First thing to say is conflicts of interest. I'm only paid by the NHS. I don't receive any income from anybody else. So this is all unconflicted or non-conflicted, or anyway, there's no conflict. I'm trying to get it to move forward and it's just done it. Excellent. Right. Good. Can you see an outline slide?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. We're moving forward. Now I've got a lot of slides here, and I probably, in the interest of time, I won't talk through many of them and I'll skip through them. But I wanted to talk about work that LIVErNORTH has directly or indirectly funded, and trainees who have managed to move the whole field forward. And this is very much a Newcastle-centric approach. The first thing we're going to talk about is what's called organ quality assessment. And I apologize for the naked liver pictures on the screen. So that's what a liver looks like. And that's a very healthy looking liver. And as surgeons, we can recognize what is a healthy liver and what is an unhealthy liver. And we rely on our eyesight, on our pictures, to be able to tell us this is a good liver and this is a bad liver. So organ quality assessment is done by the naked eye. But what would be really good is if we could get a computer to do it for us, because then we wouldn't be reliant on the expertise of the individual surgeon. We'd be able to tell, the computer would be trained by all of the surgeons, and the computer would have the benefit of thousands of years of experience in saying this is a good liver and this is a bad liver. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, when I get a phone call from a hospital somewhere in the United Kingdom, I don't have to know who it is who's doing the organ retrieval. The computer can tell me we've taken a photograph of the picture and it's been scored as 100 out of 100 or 50 out of 100 or only 20 out of 100 to give us a number that we're very comfortable dealing with numbers, because most of our assays, most of our tests ultimately come round to numbers. So this is a way of turning pictures into numbers. And it's based, like everything is nowadays, online. It's a platform, it's a place we go to on the internet where we can upload those pictures. And as part of the scoring system, of course, we've got to train the computer. So with Bradford, with AidStem, this company that we've found who are interested in this particular area, we're developing a system whereby we're going to collect thousands of images over the years to come. And as those images go into the computer, of course, the computer's going to get better and better at telling us how good the liver is. And ultimately, what we hope is that not only will we have pictures there, but we'll have other tests like video clips, maybe pictures of, for the liver perspective, pictures of the bile perhaps, or something like that that's related to the donor. And based on that, we'll have a really full picture of whether to use that liver or not. Now, we've started this already. We've got proof of concept back in the year 2000. Derek Manis and Darius Mirza, who trained together here in Newcastle. Darius became a consultant surgeon in Birmingham, and Derek was based here in Newcastle. And they took lots of pictures as part of the organ retrieval process, and they stored those pictures. And we've scored those pictures and then trained the computer with that. And it's actually already capable of giving us a score which approximates to being out of 100. So we've got plenty of space from 0 to 100 with good and bad livers. And you can see here, that's a very good liver, and that's a bizarre looking, pretty awful liver stuffed with fat, which we wouldn't use for transplantation. So based on that, we think we've got a system whereby we can hopefully accurately and objectively, right at the moment where the organ is removed, this is a good liver, this is a bad liver, this one should be transplanted. And because viability assessment, is this liver good or bad? The reason we are so interested in this particular area is because lots of livers that are donated in the United Kingdom and around the world are not used for transplantation, although by the numbers we think they should be. And there's various reasons for that. But one of the individuals, Rodrigo Figueiredo, who did a PhD with me over the 5 years. He looked at organ perfusion, and particularly organ perfusion in a cold water bath, as it were. So we were pumping livers with organ preservation solution at cold temperatures. But what he was really interested in was trying to work out how many livers out of those that are donated and not used we could actually use. So the numbers are quite remarkable, really. About 1,500 livers are donated per year in the United Kingdom. But of those, about a third are not transplanted, although the numbers say that they would be. And the reason for this is quite simple, really, is that if you're not confident that the liver will work, you tend to err on the side of not using it for transplant, based on the premise that as doctors, we first do no harm. So someone is alive and yes, they've got liver failure and they're waiting for a transplant, but actually, if they don't survive the transplant process because the organ wasn't good enough, then we feel directly culpable. We've done something we shouldn't have done. So we tend to err on the side of caution. But if we could have a reliable system that told us this liver is really good, you should go ahead. And of course, afterwards, if we could then say, well, look, we were told this liver was really good and the system we know is excellent, therefore we used it, we would be more confident about using livers. So the real challenge for United Kingdom liver surgeons at the moment is trying to use as many of those livers that organ donors have expressed a wish that their liver is used for transplantation, and they've given that gift of life, they hope, and we want to use it, but we need the confidence to be able to use it. So which ones? So what we need to do is have a test that tells us, so that the photographic picture we hope would be very helpful, but it'd be really good if we could have a specific test, a blood test, and you're all aware of what blood tests we use. If we could have a blood test for donated livers that said this is a good liver, then obviously that would make our lives really easy. However, we know that time is a big pressure in the transplant process, that we've only got a few hours, even with the liver on a pump, to be able to make that decision quickly. So what we're looking for is a test that we can put into a machine like this in the operating theatre and say, this is a good liver, go ahead, or this is a bad liver, don't go ahead. So how to discriminate? Well, we think, and the hypothesis of our research was that within the soup, within that kind of preservation solution that's going round and round the liver, there are proteins that could tell us this is a good liver or this is a bad liver. So what we did is we took soup samples, as I call them, from 9 excellent livers and 9 very bad livers. And like a prism, Dark Side of the Moon, here we are with Pink Floyd, but like the prism, if we put that soup into a prism, we can split it up into its component parts. And those component parts generally are proteins. And we can look at those proteins and say, right, which proteins in the excellent livers and which proteins are there in the bad livers, and try and work out which protein is the one we're actually going for. So the prism is this micro array splitting the soup. And if you split the soup that's going through this liver, you get this huge splurge of this protein, that protein, thousands and thousands. But what we see is some proteins, and you should be able to see my arrow, that at the start, there's not much of it in the liver. And actually over the time period of pumping the liver, it goes up. So there's more protein at the end than there is at the beginning. And in some cases, there's not much difference between the good livers and the bad livers. But if you look at, say, I'm trying to find the right one, this one up here, I've lost my arrow. Come back, arrow. Here we are. So if you look at this one here, where they start off very similarly, actually the bad livers, it goes down, and the good livers, it goes up. So this is the kind of protein we want, one which is different between good livers and bad livers. And what Rod did is he went through reams and reams of data on all of these different proteins in the soup. And he found 6 proteins that if you combined them together into a scoring system for good livers and bad livers, there was a big difference between the two. And he called this the 6-gene signature. And if we saw the 6-gene signature, we knew it was a good liver, we should transplant. And if it was a bad liver, then we should not use it. So Rod's work, we've been looking at and thinking, how do we integrate this? And there's been this huge amount of interest in warm liver perfusion, and LIVErNORTH have invested heavily, and we're very grateful to them, in warm liver perfusion because it can test viability. And there was this article in the premier medical journal only a month ago, which is the New England Journal of Medicine, which is the most impactful journal within medicine. So if it's published in the New England Journal of Medicine, we know that this is practice-changing research, that this is something we should sit up and take notice of. And the Dutch group were looking at hypothermic, that's what Rod was looking at, cold machine perfusion, and showed that it really improved the livers that were being subjected to it. So it's improving the quality of the liver. But in the editorial attached with that research, what they said was, the trouble is we can't predict which are good livers and which are bad livers on cold perfusion. So we have this test that we've been researching, that if we can show that it is definitely proving what we think it's proving, that we can potentially use cold liver perfusion, not only to improve the liver, but also tell us which ones to transplant. So this is exciting from our perspective in Newcastle, that Rod's work is now really of its time. It's coming forward as being important. So we've got together with an organ preservation solution company called Bridge to Life, based in the United States, who produced this organ preservation solution called University of Wisconsin, and they're also producing machines as well. And a company called Syros. Syros is a UK-based company, and we're looking at ways of combining the test and organ perfusion together. So we're in preliminary talks with these companies about a way of using this test and hopefully getting some of those 500 livers a year in the United Kingdom, and of course the thousands, tens of thousands organs globally, which are not used for transplantation. Because if we can use these organs for transplantation, of course we can treat many more people with liver disease rather than not offering them transplantation. And at the moment, there are people who would potentially benefit from transplantation who we can't offer a place on the waiting list because we know that they're never going to be able to get an organ. So from my perspective, treating people with liver cancer, for instance, where there's a very tight criteria of who can have a liver for liver cancer, we could broaden that criteria and get more patients accessing transplant. This would be hugely exciting. So that's one area we're looking at, and Bala, who we're going to talk about later, Bala has just started working with me. He's going to be taking that work forward. So Sam Tingle has been working in Newcastle now who did his medical school 5 years, and now he's an academic clinical fellow. And Sam has a real in-depth knowledge and interest in organ preservation as well. And he's working in both the kidney area and the liver field. And we've been looking at the kidney and the liver as two quite similar organs in many ways, although the liver, of course, is the biggest organ in your body, and in some people weighs as much as 2 kilograms. And the kidney is only small, it's only 200 grams, it's about 1/10 of the size. But actually, at a molecular level, at a cellular level, there's a lot in common between the two. Now, this is a very complicated slide, so I'm sorry about that. It's just splurged onto the picture again. But what I want to show you here is in the kidney, we noticed that a lot of blood was clotting within the kidney during perfusion. And Sam, when he was looking down at the microscope, saw lots of red cells, these things here as well, during organ perfusion. Now, the blood we use to pump the organs with during warm perfusion doesn't have any clotting factors, and it doesn't have any platelets. So it shouldn't clot. It should just keep circulating around. And that's one of the advantages we think of machine perfusion, that we're not getting clots, which happens in people, of course, because we all need a clotting system. But actually on the machine, we're seeing that clots are forming within the liver. And this is a bit concerning. Why are clots forming? And there's probably various different reasons for this. One of them is that the microcirculation is damaged and that these red cells are just being trapped there. They're not clotting, they're just trapping. And the other thing is that maybe that proteins are being formed, like the proteins we've seen in cold perfusion, and the proteins are binding the blood cells together. So they're just blocking it because there's just so much protein soup there rather than specific clots. So this is a really interesting finding. This is published in the American Journal of Transplantation last year, and we've got various theories which I'll come to later as to why that's happening. But Sam's really big interest, apart from blood, is fat. And of course, fatty liver disease is, like coronavirus, one of the plagues of our time. That there's a lot of us, unfortunately, who are developing fatty liver disease. And if we can get rid of fat from the liver, then we can potentially use more organs for transplantation. So this was a project that he did in conjunction with Quentin Anstey. Now, Quentin is a professor of liver medicine in Newcastle, and you probably had talks from LIVErNORTH from Quentin in the past. And his big thing is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And Quentin, because we talk to each other, physicians, surgeons, and we were on a ward round and we were talking about it'd be really good if we could get the fat out of the liver on the pump before we transplanted it, because we get a lot of organ donors who have fatty liver disease. This compound, 2,4-dinitrophenol, is very closely related to trinitrotoluene, TNT. So TNT, as a lot of you know, is an explosive. And this stuff, 2,4-dinitrophenol, is like explosions going on in your cells, basically. You put it into cells and it makes them go amazing. It makes them just go completely mad. They explode with energy. And it basically uncouples mitochondrial respiration. What it means is that your energy producing apparatus within your cells just starts producing heat, lots and lots of heat. And this drug was the reason that the FDA in America was started back in the 1920s and 1930s. So 1920s, 1930s, if you remember, cocktail parties, people elegant, looking very thin in their dresses. But of course, a lot of people weren't thin even then, and they wanted to get into those thin dresses. And so this drug was marketed by various people as ways of losing weight quickly. And it's fantastically good at making you lose weight. The trouble is it's very dangerous, and it can raise your body temperature to huge levels, at which point you fit and you die. And the FDA were created to stop people accessing 2,4-dinitrophenol. So it's totally illegal to be taken by people. But what we can do, of course, because we're not giving it to people, is give it to livers, and we can cool the liver on the pump. We can make sure that we can get the good benefits without getting the harms of having this TNT in your liver. And it works amazingly well on the pump, and it increases the respiratory rate of the liver cells quite dramatically. And thankfully, we don't have this effect because, of course, the liver is outside the body. So this is something we're actively looking at as a way of defatting livers on the pump. But we think we need more than 24 hours. And that's one of the problems is how long can we keep the liver and defat it? We need more than 24 hours. But there is data now that we can keep the liver on a pump for a week, and that will be plenty of time to get rid of the fat. So this is very exciting research that we're trying to get moved to the next stage and actually do some transplants using that. But of course, we're using a compound that is pretty toxic. So we have to be very careful about how we're going to do that and how we're going to wash it out of the liver before we give it to people. So the next person's work I was going to share with you was Bala. Bala has just started working with me as an NIHR, the National Institute of Health Research, Blood Transplant Research Unit Fellow. And Bala's going to be looking at this protein system called complement. Now, complement is an area which Newcastle leads the world on. Professor Neil Sheeran and Professor Kevin Marchbank, based at the Hemolytic Uremic Syndrome Investigation Unit in the RVI, are the world leaders on complement biology. And one of our theories about why these clots are forming in the livers is that it's around complement. So complement is a series of proteins within your blood which are designed to attack bacteria, mostly bacteria. The trouble is that the pathways that they use to make these attack complexes, this membrane attack complexes, can be activated by other things other than bacteria. And one of those is a damaged liver. So the theory is that complement is being activated within the liver on the pump, and the complement is created by the liver on the pump. But we've got some really good ways of getting rid of that protein potentially, or blocking its actions. And we've already seen in some preliminary experiments that in the really damaged livers, the DCD, donation after circulatory death livers, as opposed to the donor after brainstem death livers, and we can talk about that later if you want to, but in the more damaged livers, the complement levels are significantly higher. And the further you perfuse the liver for, the more of this protein there is in the system. And that's these red bars versus the blue bars. And again, with that membrane attack complex, the C5 beta 9, there's huge amounts of that in the system by the time we get to the end of perfusion. But the proteins that stop it binding to your blood cells haven't changed. So we think this is a really exciting new way of trying to improve livers on the pump, is to get rid of that complement or to block the complement. So that's what we're planning to do. And of course, 2019 feels like a lifetime ago, but it was only 2 years ago. I was talking to LIVErNORTH about how we were hoping to get extracorporeal liver support active in Newcastle over the next year. This is the idea of having the liver on the pump and connecting it to a poor individual, a patient with acute liver failure, and supporting them through their acute liver failure to the point where their liver recovers. Much like we do with heart-lung machines already, this would be a liver support machine using the pump technology and using blood to make people better. Unfortunately, this little thing called coronavirus came in the way, and the whole situation has changed, and these kind of systems are under more scrutiny now as potential ways of transmitting infectious particles, etc. And NICE, the National Institute for Clinical Excellence, has on March the 30th said that we're not allowed to do this unless it's part of a formal research program. So I have real ambitions that Newcastle will be the centre that delivers this therapy for the United Kingdom, but I'm going to have to get some specific research support in place. And that's where I'll be coming to LIVErNORTH again, I'm afraid, John, that ask you all for your support in getting this across the line. I have to say a big thank you to Cambridge, because we have this joint research partnership with Cambridge for helping in a lot of this work. I have to say a big thank you to other charity partners and to the donors and their families and the big team of people who've come together to make this all work, all of this research happen. But front and center, right in the middle of the slide, is LIVErNORTH. And I have to say a big thank you for all your support over the years. We've got lots of other exciting developments coming through. We're hoping to bring with John Dark, you may be aware of John Dark, the cardiothoracic surgeon, the European Society of Organ Transplant conference to Newcastle, to the new SAGE. There's going to be a big conference centre built between the SAGE and the Baltic. So we're hoping to bring 3,000 transplant surgeons and we want LIVErNORTH to be part of that as well. So there's lots of exciting things going on, and all of your hard work has formed and created this, which is the future of transplants across the world. So thank you.
That's excellent. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Well, you guys, you know, this is what you're creating. It's quite something.
Well, I always make the point that the volunteers who make the donations and give so much don't get any rewards. You know, they're not paid. They're unpaid volunteers, and the only reward is for clinicians and researchers to say thank you.
Yeah.
And you do that, Colin. You know, we've always had a nice big thank you from you, so that's good. And you've kept us in the loop all the time.
Yeah, well, it's the very least I can do. I mean, I wish I could get you guys more involved. I mean, actually, these kind of meetings, it's really, I mean,